Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video. In this one, it's going to be an update video for the ANIMATE Guardian guide, which I've had for over a year, and it's been pretty much accurate for the entirety of that video, all the way up until now. And the only changes that's really happened are minor changes to gear, and I figured there's some other unique items that we can now utilize for some really juicy kind of utility setups with the ANIMATE Guardian. And since we have a larger variety of minion builds or builds that are utilizing minions to allow the ANIMATE Guardian to be used, I figured an updated video to showcase a bunch of different setups would be in the store. So I'm just going to dive into it right away and I'll show you this. So before I show you the gear pieces, I do want to mention a few mechanical limitations. And these mechanical limitations, I will show you them in game to give you an exact display of how this actually works. So when you summon an ANIMATE Guardian, you must make sure that he is of high level already, like 18, 19, preferably level 20 before you start using him. Because when he dies, you will lose all of the gear that he had equipped. Now, there is a benchcraft that allows you to put on a chest piece that allows him to drop that chest piece when he dies. That modifier will only happen on, or that drop on death will only happen on that specific item. So it is a completely useless modifier, and therefore we're not going to bother it. So in this case, I am going to go pick myself up an ANIMATE Guardian and take these two. I'm going to show you some really cool things with this. First off, we're going to pick up some gear for him, and I'll show you a few limitations. And after I've gone through the mechanics of the ANIMATE Guardian, I will obviously show you the different sets of gear pieces that he can use. So first things first, he is unable to use ranged weapons. This includes bows, this includes wands, but he is able to use pretty much anything else. So I'm just going to give you a display of how that looks, if I can just move. Now, first things first. The ANIMATE Guardian has a limitation of the item level of gear he can use based on the gem level. At level 20, he's able to use up to item level 100, which means that once he's level 20, you can use any gear in the game for him. In this case, due to the gear and skill tree, the ANIMATE Guardian is level 4. And at the second row of sentence in the list of modifiers, you can see at the bottom there, it says, can use items requiring up to level 43. This is obviously a very low level ANIMATE Guardian. So I'm going to toss out a bow first. As you can see, the bow is there. Let's change the loot filter real quick to a soft one so we can see it. Now that didn't help. Default then, whatever. We'll use the default loot filter. So if I try to summon, as you can see, I'm casting the spell, but nothing's happening. That's a problem, obviously. So because of this, we are then unable to use a bow on him. This goes for wands and bows. However, if we summon, say, a pair of boots, as you can see, our Guardian is literally a pair of boots. That's it. He is a pair of boots. There he is. Looks ridiculous, but that's it. You can actually have an ANIMATE Guardian only wearing boots if you want to, such as Victorious Flight. Now, Victorious Flight are pretty interesting. Victorious Flight, they give it a small radius of increased movement speed to nearby allies. So if you don't give too much shit about his gear and his survivability, you can definitely use this. However, as soon as you put an armor on him, now he has boots and an armor. And if you put a helmet on him, well, guess what? Now he has a helmet. And you can put gloves on him as well. So when it comes to the gearing, he's able to use body armor, boots, and gloves, helmet, and weapons. And when it comes to the weapons, he is able to dual wield melee weapons. He's also able to wear a shield. He is also able to wear a two-handed weapon as long as they are melee weapons. So in this case, I'm going to toss out a shield first. As you can see here, he is now wielding a shield. Amazing. Give him a sword. Now he's wielding a sword and a weapon. Now what happens if I then want to replace any of this? Say I want to replace the shield, but I now have a weapon. Since the last item I summoned was the sword, if I do this, it will actually replace the oldest one, in this case the shield. So now he's dual wielding these items. If I were to apply this one, he will drop the left-hand weapon because the last one was the right-hand weapon, and bam, he now has two of these swords instead. So it's always the last item added that will be replaced if you're replacing. And as you might have noticed, I don't get those items back. So if he dies, or if you resummon him on top of items, which is why it's very important that if you accidentally unequip gear that disallowed you to actually wear the gear to actually have him summoned, and you want to resummon him, you want to make sure you don't target any items when you summon him again, and he'll have all the gear again. Obviously, this is risky to do in a map area, so what I would recommend to do is to simply go back to your hideout. and summon him in there, because there cannot be any items in your hideout's ground or on the floor. This allows you to safely resummon your Guardian without risking replacing any of his gear pieces. If you want to put quality on the gem, that's perfectly fine. You will still be able to resummon him. The gear on this Animate Guardian is not locked in this specific gem. The gear is locked on this specific character, which is in Standard League right now. So if I were to unequip this gem and I equip another gem, I can summon him again, and voila, his gear is there. There is a bug, however, if you are going to resummoning your Animate Guardian this way, and the new one you summon from is of lower level, unable to wear the gear he had that you tried to resummon him with. The gear would visually display as him wearing it, but they are bugged and will not actually function. It's only visually displayed. It actually visually displays the buff as well, but they don't actually do anything, which is really, really weird. So now that you know the mechanics of the Animate Guardian, I'm going to go through and explain the actual gear sets that you can use for him. So there's a couple of things to think about. One is his survival, and there are two different main ways of keeping him alive. The most notable way is Mask of the Stitch Demon. This is a strategy we've used for a long time, allowing you to have regenerate 1% of life per second per 500 flat energy shield, which means that the rest of the gear should be focused mainly on energy shield basis, as well as having a body armor that also has a bench grab with percent as life as extra energy shield, and that's the way we can generate a massive amount of regeneration on the Enemy Guardian thanks to the Mask of the Stitch Demon. In the current state of the market, this helmet is going for about 50C, which means that this is pretty much the best choice in terms of keeping him alive right now when it comes to keeping the budget down. However, there's a few other things you can do that has been coming up lately, specifically when Maven came into the game, and that is the Doppelganger's Geist. Now, Doppelganger's Geist has an ability, grants level 20 Unhinge, and this is something I want to talk about when it comes to Nama, who's... I can't even fucking flame. There we go. There we find it. Here's another thing, because people think that this would work with the Animate Guardian. Now, the Animate Guardian cannot trigger abilities, cannot get abilities or skills from the weapon. So Soul Rest, Namahu's Flame, Doppelganger's Insanity. Neither of these will none of this will ever work on the Animate Guardian, which is a good thing when it comes to the Doppelganger's Geist, because the Doppelganger's Geist, they make the character insane, which means they get increased critical strike chance, and enemies killed by their hits are destroyed. However, since they are always going to be sane because of this, they always take less physical and chaos damage taken, and they will always regenerate 10% of life over 1 second when hit, which is a very, very good defensive mechanic to keep him alive. Obviously, this does not prevent him from dying towards harder rolled maps when you pop a harvest, specifically the blue harvest. There's a lot of shotgunning mechanics that can actually drop a very well-geared Animate Guardian. I've seen it happen several times. Lost multiple high-budget Animate Guardians to this. But for the most part, there's almost no content in the game that can kill them, and the very few encounters that can kill them must have to, the planet needs to align, and everything has to fall perfectly with a bunch of crits and a shock to actually kill him when you have a proper gear on him. This is why this type of strategy with Doppelganger or Mask of the Stitch Demon requires you to make sure that the Enemy Guardian has high life. This not only goes for the gear, but also consider using Meixsell support, keeping away from bearer's effects on the ground, as well as keeping him close to you, and minion life to obviously ramp up the HP that he regenerates from both of these strategies. So these are the main defensive strategies. Obviously, there's an outlier build, which is the Dark Pact build that I'm currently playing in Scourge 3.16, where I'm stacking so much defensive stats for minions because of the way Dark Pact works with skeletons, that I don't need to use any of these pieces and can therefore use other items. So instead of Doppelganger, Mask of the Stitch Demon, I can use more 100% focus on offensive scaling. So these are two main ways of scaling this defense. So when I talk about the Mask of the Stitch Demon, which I'll focus on first, the chest piece you would want to use is something in the lines of this. You want to use a body armor, and this search is very simple to do. You want to have some life as much as possible. You would preferably want to stack up some chaos resistance because he doesn't have very much of that. And then you want to make sure there is a prefix slot open by searching this way. By doing it this way, you can see that you can get some items, preferably not corrupted, because this you can bench craft percent life as extra energy shield, and therefore have a very good base for the Enemy Guardian to survive very well with, whilst using Mask of the Stitch Demon. This is even better because it has energy shield base on it. Another option to do would be to have nearby enemies are blinded, which is a influence modifier, and searching this becomes a lot more expensive, but it blinds the enemies. Now, the blind has been nerfed into 3.16, but it's still very preferable. However, the Doppelganger guys can take over this role, and that means you can skip the Mask of Stitch Demon. So the main sets of this would be to look at the helmet. What are the options on helmets? And I'm not going to show you on the market, and instead I'm going to show you on a Hubris Circlet, for example. So what happens when you get the access to a helmet completely depends on the build you're playing. Every type of different build that utilizes Animate Guardian will have different sets that you can use. Normally, you can go with anything that just helps you out. For example, you can go with a Leercast, which is the generic low-budget set. It just increases the enemies, you and nearby allies damage by 15%, and you deal less damage. So you put this on the Animate Guardian, and you have a Doppelganger's guys. He's not going to die very often, or at all, and this will increase the damage you're doing. However, on a low budget, I would pretty much just settle with something like an Ambush Charge Crusader Chainmail, for example. This is a 1 Chaos or 1 Alch item. Gives him a little bit of defense on stats, but this is a gear item or a set item that makes him not very tanky. He's mostly going to survive, but there's a lot more content that can kill him. Unless you're playing a Dark Pact build, then he's pretty much immortal at any time. So these are like the generic low-budget pieces that you can use, and when it comes to the weapon, that would be a Dying Breath, which is essentially doing the same thing as Leercast, increases effective non-cursed items from your skills, which doesn't apply to the Animate Guardian, but makes enemies deal, nearby allies deal increased damage, which is really solid with a few other modifiers to it. So this is basically the super low-budget setup with Leercast, Ambush Charge Crusader Chainmail, and Dying Breath, and then when it comes to the boots, you'd use pretty much Victorious Flight for the increased movement speed, and the gloves would then be a southbound gloves. All of these items are about 1 chaos, if not less. It is a super generic, mega low budget Animate Guardian. He's most likely going to die eventually in the harder content. This is a good way to get a lot of buffs from your Animate Guardian, essentially for almost for free. And then when he dies, or if he dies, then once that happens, that's when you're going to be in a position where it's going to tell you that, hey, it's time to upgrade the Animate Guardian. Losing this gear has already happened, so just use this as a low budget approach when you start mapping with a build that uses AG, and then just switch over to high budget or more investment to it when he dies. That's basically how I play it. So now that we know about the low budget set, we're going to talk about the higher budgets. So we're going to focus on the helmet after I told you which weapon we're going to use, and the weapon is very simple. It's going to be a Kingmaker. The reason we use a Kingmaker is because we get 45. This is actually inaccurate in this PoE wiki right now. They give 10 plus fortification stacks or whatever it's called, 45 charges, which means you take 10% reduced damage from you and nearby allies. Still gives you the 45 and the Culling Strike, the crit multi and the Culling Strike, which means that you can do extra damage. Most importantly, the Culling Strike, and for higher budget builds, most of those builds will scale crit, and there the crit multi takes place for increased efficiency. To make this weapon, you can either buy it or you can get a Soul Taker. Soul Taker together with a Heartbreaker. Buy one of these together with a Heartbreaker. And then vendor those two together with one Orb of Fusing, which will give you a Kingmaker back. Just look at which is cheapest, Heartbreaker, Soul Taker, and a Fusing. Look at the prices for those compared to the market prices for the Kingmaker axe. So that's the axe. So, helmet. Generic low, high, medium budget would go with a Mask of Stitch Demon, because I'm pretty sure Doppelganger will be a bit more expensive. So Mask of Stitch Demon will allow you to not do this and simply just focus on the chest piece I showed you on the market earlier. However, with the Doppelganger's guys or the Dark Pact build, in a Dark Pact build, you would just use a nearby enemies or blinded chest piece with life and chaos rest, and you're done. However, with the Doppelganger or that setup, the helmet would be very different. So the helmet has a couple of different approaches to it, and it all depends on influence. If you are playing with a physical-oriented build, a build that is strictly dealing physical damage, what you want to do is look for a nearby enemies take increased physical damage modifier, which is right here from Elder, item level 85. You can buy these very cheaply on the market, just complete trash modifiers with just the enemies taking increased physical damage. You can also elevate this if you want to go crazy on a higher budget. And if you're playing a build such as the Mage Skeletons, you want to make sure that the enemies take increased damage from both cold, lightning, as well as fire. This means you want to go for a Shaper base, which means the enemies take increased elemental damage instead, which is from a Shaper base. Same process there. If you're playing a build that's doing chaos damage, such as the Dark Pact, then you go for the Hunter base, and Hunter base makes enemies have less chaos resistance. You kind of get the point where I'm going here, right? the influences here, Redeemer for cold conversion, Warlord is fire, for example. Just get the negative resistances. And the thing is, there is one more helmet you can use above this that would be even better if your enemy guardian is surviving. And this is mostly for the Dark Pact build, but can be used in minion builds as well, and that is Crown of the Tyrant. This is currently what I'm using in my AG. Crown of the Tyrant gives enemies 10% to all resistances. Since it doesn't specifically say elemental resistances, it actually affects chaos as well. This means that this one is the best for mage skeletons, it is the best for Dark Pact, it is the best for everything, unless, of course, you are running with a physical approach. However, depending on the color of the socket, you also give them flat damage, which makes this the best choice. I am running a white socket because of Dark Pact, and it is actually really annoying. And it's not super expensive to get the white socket with a Harvest or Varici from Betrayal. But the remaining sockets are very easy. Just use Chromatic Orbs on the Crown of the Tyrant, and in the currently, you can actually use it in the Kranglenator. Just corrupt it and scrangle it if you want to. However, Crown of the Tyrant is about a little over an Exalted right now, so it's a bit expensive. So that's how you approach the things when it comes to the helmet. So why I'm waiting with the boots and gloves last is because there's a very easy way to adapt them to give you as much damage as possible if you go away from the southbound gloves with the Victorious Flight. And it kind of depends on how crazy you want to build your character. And this has to do with curse applications. Now, it's been tested and confirmed. This is a test we do every league to make sure they haven't changed it. And that is when you are a player applying a curse on an enemy, and you can only apply one curse, and then you have your Animate Guardian be able to apply 2 curses, but he only applies 1 curse. Those curses stack, because he is essentially applying the second curse, if you will. So how do we do this the easiest way? Well, Windscreen Boots is the easy answer to it. Windscreen Boots allows you to apply an additional curse. By putting these boots on the Animate Guardian, you're then able to run another curse on the Animate Guardian. And this is what we do with a corrupted, rare, or unique pair of gloves. This also means that if your character is able to apply 2 curses, and you are applying 2 curses, you can make your Guardian be able to apply 3 curses and apply a 3rd curse that way. And the way to do that would mean that you would need a chess piece that actually has the availability to apply an additional curse. This is mainly from the additional curse modifier on a chess piece from a Hunter influence. It's very expensive, and it is possible. So what kind of curses do we want to run on when it comes to the gloves? So we're going to go back to Craft of Exile, and I'm going to go to a pair of gloves, and we're going to look at corrupted modifiers, if I can find it down here. We have Despair on here. Okay, I can't even look at it. So Despair on hit. We have Elemental Weakness on hit. Enfeeble, Temporal Change, Vulnerability. These are the curses you can choose from. So for example, for a Chaos-oriented build, you want to go for Despair. For something like a Mage Skeleton build, you might want to run with Elemental Weakness. If you want to be having a defensive curse, Enfeeble or TC is good. For physical, you can go with Vulnerability. Now these curses here are actually, these numbers are actually incorrect, because they've changed it to be a 40 to up to 48% increased efficiency. Now, it turns out that 48% increased effect of a curse on a corrupted implicit glove is equivalent to a level 19 or level 20 curse. This is insanely strong. So this is the kind of approach you want to go with. I'm going to show you on the market here how to search for this, and a couple of quick takes on this. Do keep in mind that the main reason we're doing this and moving one of the curses to the AG is because we can then focus on using a better curse, being in the form of a Mark curse. Most importantly, that would be Assassin's Mark for most builds, Poacher's Mark for some builds. But Assassin's Mark is the main one that we're using, allowing us to not need to use the Hexed curse, because that is something our AG is doing for us. So for example, the Dark Pact build, I need a Despair curse. What I would do is I would type the little mark here, and I would do Despair on hit and look for the implicit modifier curse enemies with Despair on hit with increased effect. Now I want to have 48% because I'm not going to go with a limp dick version. And I always want to make sure that they have life. If I can, I would look for Chaos Rest. They can be a bit expensive with this, and make sure they're searching for gloves, but it should be automatic already. So doing a search like this shows me that I can get Oscarm. Oscarm is not very good, but the trigger is not going to happen. However, it's a little bit of life, and the Chaos Resistance is minus. So you can get some unique ones that's actually really good. For example, the Embalmer. This one gives Chaos damage, while Toxins, these don't really matter. This one doesn't even work. But however, this one actually gives Chaos Rest and Life, which is exactly what we were looking for. So Embalmer Gloves would work, Rare Pieces would work. If using the Master Stitch Demon and ES base would be better. Keep in mind that the prices is based at the 48% right now, so I'm looking at the best version of this. Another way we can do this would be Elemental Weakness on hit, for example. Again, take the implicit version, search for this. I'm looking for Life and Chaos Rest. Again, Embalmer is a great suggestion for this. Gives you Chaos Rest, Life, pretty bad energy shield base. 5 Chaos for this would work amazingly for... that's probably a price fixer, by the way. 20 Chaos or something like that for... Mage Skeletons, for example, works amazingly. And then again, the same thing when you're looking at things like vulnerability on hit. Again, take the implicit value, search for this, and say voila, you have the Embalmer. Again, very common to see these modifiers on the Embalmer, which is a really solid choice for that matter. 35, 50, 50, 60, 100, it goes up quite quickly, and you run for the vulnerability for the physical-oriented builds. And that kind of covers those main sets that you can use. There's a variety of other sets you can use as well, which is more of a niche approach. Most notably would be Sin Eater. If you're struggling with elemental ailments, putting a Sin Eater weapon and a decent shield on the Animate Guardian before you go for Kingmaker strategy and whatnot can actually make you completely immune to elemental ailments. As long as you have Meat Shield on your Animate Guardian, he's always going to be near you and almost always going to be within your radius when you get hit by elemental ailments. Enemies inflict elemental ailments on you instead of nearby allies. As long as he's around you, all the elemental ailments that you get hit with will be applied to the Animate Guardian, which should survive with a proper gear setup that I've just been explaining. So that is one set you can use as well. There is a variety of other pieces. Normally, if you play Dark Pact build, you have a lot of HP. You can use Sign of the Sin Eater. There's you can dual wield with another weapon if you want to provide hinder and a couple of other things. There's a large variety of different uniques you can run with him. But most important pieces to remember is keeping him alive, which are the first initial items I talked about in this video. And then you have to choose if you want to have the defensive gain from the elemental ailment immunity through the Sign Eater, or if you want to do more damage and have more fortification with damage reduction taken through the Kingmaker strategy. And then if you're going with a curse setup or not using a curse setup, and how many curses do you actually need on the Animate Guardian. It all comes down to that. I hope you guys had use of this video. I just wanted to make a little quick update on how the Animate Guardian works and the efficiency behind it. I know this video was a little bit long, but if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more content. Until next time, Excells, as always, stay safe, keep rocking.